Great. There we are. Thanks.
Thanks, Christine. Hello, everybody. It's so nice to be with you for this third session that I've done over the last, I think, 6 or 9 weeks. So the one good thing that came out of COVID, I guess, was our ability to be able to do this, because we certainly wouldn't have been able to do this kind of thing. The technology was there, but I don't know our skill set was there previously to COVID. I know mine wasn't. So it's really nice to be here with you again and talking about a topic today that I think is near and dear to everybody's heart. We all want our kids to have great social lives. We all want, our kids to be happy in their social lives. And we worry a little bit sometimes about the world of friends with our children. So hopefully this will help you think about some new things, maybe give you a bit of information that you didn't have before. But we welcome questions, so throw them in the chat. If I can stop partway through and maybe answer a couple as we go along, so we're not bombarded at the end, perhaps. So sometimes I know if I'm doing a workshop, I have a question, and then somebody goes, half hour later, the question's gone, or it doesn't make sense now because it's out of the context of the presentation. So we'll do that. And I understand Christine has a bit of a poll, so before we get to the Q&A, that'll happen as well. So we will get started. So what I'm hoping to look at today a little bit and talk about is sort of what are social skills, breaking that down a little bit. How and when do they develop? What is the role of friends in children's lives and our own lives? How many is enough? A lot of people seem to think that there's a magic number of friends that a children should or can have. How do we as adults, parents, teachers, and other people in children's lives help children learn the social skills that they need to learn? And then I want to look at a couple of common situations, birthday parties being one, because that's always a bit of a social challenge for particularly young children, but even older kids sometimes. And then sharing, because that seems to be a popular one as well. So we'll take a look at a couple of those, and then we'll do some Q&A if people have questions. So we are, whether we like to believe it or not, we are animals in this grand scheme of life, and we are a very social species. We thrive and survive by relying and being with each other. So as much as our culture sometimes seems to value independence, we have to realize that from a nature perspective and a biology perspective, that is not the way we are designed. Our society has changed significantly, particularly in the last 20 to 30 years with the invention of technology. But our biology and our basic need for togetherness and tribes and connection has not changed. So there's a lot of friction and stress and rub around that. We need to be independent and do things for ourselves, but then we need to be dependent on each other for a lot of things. And that can be hard. So, and it seems to be harder now. It's more challenging for us to find meaningful, deep connection. And COVID has made that, particularly for our children, that much harder. We have a generation of children who were born in COVID who don't have the same social interactions and social environment, being with masks and distancing and not being with people at all for a long time. So those all will play into how our children of COVID learn about social skills and being with each other. So we need to help our children and our friends and family create relationships that are fulfilling and help us navigate this ever complicated 21st century world. So the world is not going to get simpler, I don't think. It's just going to get more and more complex. And again, that dependence on each other is key to our ability to navigate all of that stuff that comes to us. So when I was thinking about what makes a good friend, because that's kind of what I want to make sure we're focused on is sort of good quality friendships. And everybody's going to have a different kind of definition and a different set of needs for what they expect and what they think they are as a good friend. But this came out of a Psychology Today article, which is a a decent source that has peer-reviewed articles. So these are not just people's opinions. There's some research behind a lot of the material that they post. So this seemed to be a decent list from my perspective. So this is one I'm going to share. But again, you may have your own list or your own ideas to add, change, whatever. That's fine. So trustworthiness, honesty, dependability, loyalty. You're trusting as well as trustworthy. You have empathy and can express that. Non-judgmental, good listener, supportive of others in good times and in bad, self-confident, able to see humor, and fun to be around. So when we think about those, they're traits, most of them. Some of them have skills within them, but some of them are traits. So one of the first things I want to sort of introduce you to, if you haven't seen this brilliant piece of work, is the virtues. So the virtues it's a global program that was developed a number of years ago now, in an effort to find commonality amongst all cultures globally, where it could sort of provide a baseline for how we see and interact and what we value in terms of characteristics of humans. So this list is, and I believe it's 52, so conveniently that's one a year if you want to embrace this in your family, is a list of characteristics. So these are not skills, although there are skills in them, and there are behaviors within those. But what these are characteristics of who we are. And if you look at this list, many, if not all of them, would contribute to a good friendship, right? So you look at caring and compassion and consideration, cooperation, and flexibility and forgiveness and friendliness. And so there's a lot of these traits, if not all of them, that would contribute in a positive way to building good, solid social relationships. And friendships are important, but our social lives also include things like when we're out in public, in the world, in stores and things, certainly our workplaces, our school lives. So this isn't just about making friends. This is about being able to function in a social world appropriately. So when we have these characteristics, it can help us to do that. This program, so there's a website, which I will put at the end of this presentation. There's a list of resources, and this is on it. So there are sort of 5 strategies that the authors have put together in order to sort of embrace and live this world of virtues. So the first one, and probably the easiest one, is speaking the language. So we tend to sometimes with children dumb things down. And I'm going to challenge you, if you use anything on this list, to use these words. They are rich, they are complicated, they mean something, they are not good and bad. So when we're giving children feedback, for example, so if our children are sharing, miraculously sometimes, if they're sharing and we want to give them feedback on that, and I use the word feedback instead of praise because they're different. Instead of saying, good job, or look at you, you shared, we could say things like, wow, I saw some real cooperation with you and your sister today. You took something and you gave it to her, you shared it with her. That was really considerate. So when we start to give children this language, they start to see themselves in those words when we do it over time. So instead of seeing themselves as good and bad, because if you say a child is good, then they will ascertain for themselves, even if you never tell them they're bad, they will put that label on themselves for the opposite behaviors. So they don't have to be told they're bad, they'll just internalize that. So we want them to internalize some of this, great complex language and these these characteristics. So when they start to hear these things and they think, okay, so when I did this, that means I'm cooperative. And over time and repetition, they start to see themselves as cooperative people. And when we see ourselves as a certain thing, we tend to behave that way. So this is a really great resource to use. Again, when you're giving children feedback, and when children are missing it, so when they're fighting and they're not sharing, instead of saying something negative, you could say, wow, I think we really need to find our cooperation in this situation. So even when children are lacking the skill or the character trait, you can call it to them and say, listen, I need to see some cooperation. Instead of saying, you need to stop doing that, or, all the plethora of things that we say to our kids when they're having trouble. So you can use it in both those situations. Recognizing teachable moments. So there are teachable moments every minute of every day with children. So part of our job is to step back sometimes and recognize when those are, because we tend to go on to auto parent. We're very busy, we're stressed, we're distracted, we've got a lot on our mind, we got a lot to do. So we go into auto parent and things just kind of come out of our mouths. And that's just the reality of parenting. It always has been. But there are times where if we take a step back, we can say, okay, what does my child need from me to learn something in this moment, to learn a skill? Because social interactions are skill building exercises. So we have to find moments where we can teach our children the skills they need to manage in a social situation. So those are sort of the two primary ones, and there's setting clear boundaries. There's a whole program around this virtue stuff. It's really, really good. So setting clear boundaries, again, using virtues language, honoring the spirit, which is again honoring children's or people's sort of inner selves, and companioning, which is it's a difficult skill, but it's an interesting one. So it's basically asking questions to dig deeper and help somebody for themselves to dig deeper into something. So I will attach a video of the people who developed this program. She's doing this companioning with a puppet, and the puppet is scared to, it's a caterpillar, and he doesn't want to turn into a butterfly because he's scared of falling. So she goes through this whole companioning process to get to why this caterpillar is scared of flying, or scared of falling and flying. And by the end, there's a resolution and the caterpillar can move forward. So it's a process, but it's a really interesting one. So I will include that in the resources if you want to take a look at that. So this isn't necessarily skills. This is really characteristics. So this is about who your child is becoming in terms of being a person. In terms of skills, a lot of being friends and having a healthy social life stems around emotional development. So empathy being one of the primary ones. And empathy is the ability to put yourself into somebody else's shoes so that you can truly understand how they feel. So one of the things about children is they don't have a lot of experiences to draw from when they're very young. So empathy is there. There's some people that say that we are born with a certain amount of it, but it is certainly a skill that develops over time as children have more experiences. And the best way to teach empathy to children is to give it to them first. So when they experience empathy on the receiving end, they can then understand how it feels when somebody else understands them. And that gives them more ability as they get older to be able to do that same thing and understand that it has a powerful impact on somebody else. And it feels nice when somebody empathizes with you. Emotional awareness of self and others. So you need to be aware of your own feelings, but you also need to be able to look at somebody and try and figure out how they're feeling. in order to manage this social life. And then you can decide sort of what you're going to do with all of that. Emotional regulation is a huge one, because when you're in a relationship with somebody else, you need to be able sometimes to manage your own feelings. You need to be able to understand somebody else's, those kinds of things. So you need to regulate. If you're getting angry with somebody, you know, you're not going to have very many friends if you continually lash out and hit them, for example. So we need that component of emotional regulation. The ability to compromise and negotiate is also really, really important. And this is not a full set of skills that are needed. This is just sort of some that are foundational in my opinion, and things that children right from a young age can start to work on with them. So lots of children just seem to naturally be good at compromising and negotiating until they don't get their way. So they'll try all sorts of things with you to compromise and negotiate. And as long as there's some success in that, they're happy. But we want to teach kids how to compromise and negotiate respectfully, and compromise being that, you know, somebody else gets what they want sometimes too. Communication, so the ability to communicate clearly, to read body language, emotional communication, so using language and those kinds of things. A tolerance of differences. We live in a very, very diverse world. We want to teach children that, you know, just because somebody is different in some way doesn't mean they are less worthy of our time and our friendship. Consideration of other people's wants and needs, and being able to problem solve and collaborate. So when you break it down and you look at this list, these are complicated skills that take a long time to develop. So the idea that we can put a bunch of kids into a room, you know, even 4 or 5 days a week, and they're just going to figure this out is not necessarily the case. So a lot of this is developmental. We can't teach children things that their brains are not ready and their biology is not ready to learn. So we can model and we can show them, we can expose them from a very young age to all these things. But it's like a garden. You plant the seeds, but the seeds will not take root until the conditions are right. And in the case of young children, part of the conditions being right is just their developmental age and stage. So a lot of these things, let's look at, so awareness of self and others, consideration of other people's wants and needs. These are complicated brain functions that require children to do two things. I have to consider myself and I have to consider somebody else. Well, that's a frontal cortex function, which is the front part of the brain. And that doesn't even start to really mature until kids are between 5 and 7. So if we're expecting 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, and even in a lot of cases 4-year-olds, to have these skills, we have to realize that these are under construction and the brain is not really fully ready to even start to work on these things in a meaningful way until the brain is between 5 and 7. So it's helpful to learn the basics as you go along in parenting of some of the basic child development stuff. There's so much information now about brain development. It's readily available. Again, I've put some resources at the back of the presentation that have some good, simplified, not scientific, child development ages and stages. So it's a good idea to sort of keep up on that a little bit so that you can understand what's typical, what are good expectations. And expectations are always just a little bit beyond where your child is at, so that you're always pushing that development a little bit, but not so much that a child can't, just hasn't got the skills to do it, because that creates a lot of emotional response. You get a lot of frustration, you get a lot of anger, you've got a lot of kids who don't think they're good enough because they can never achieve because expectations are too high. So we want to be careful of that. It's said in a lot of literature that it can take 10,000 hours of practice to master a skill. Now that's assuming the brain is already ready to master that skill. So 1,000 hours would be, I worked it out, it was a year and 5 months, I believe, 24 hours a day for a year and 5 months to master something. So we know that children don't develop, the brain doesn't develop fully until, depending on who you read and what you see, somewhere between 20 and now they're saying 30. So it's not like a baby bird where we've got, 3 weeks, 5 weeks until the next brood is coming or until the fall weather comes. And we got to kick these things out of the nest and make sure they're ready to go. This takes years. So we want to make sure that we're doing a good, solid job and we're not rushing our kids into developing skills that they're not ready for. So we want to take a step back and realize that this is going to take some time and some effort on your part. And there's a natural part of also this social development. So again, we're a social species. So there are inborn things in us that draw us to being able to work with and get along with others. So this isn't like your child a blank slate and you got to start from scratch. There is empathy. We look at babies and when one baby cries, the other baby cries. There's some argument whether that's empathy, but you can see when children receive empathy a lot when they're young. All of a sudden, for example, my daughter has a 3-year-old, and they were both sick recently. And Noah's comment was, well, if you're sick and I'm sick, who's going to take care of us? And then it was like, well, you can take care of me, Mommy, and then I'll take care of you. So that whole empathy piece comes from being empathized with and being shown caring in times of need. And then they realize and they just internalize that and they give it back. So that's kind of what we want our kids to do. So, so how much is enough and what is it about friends that, in children's lives? So we need friends. We have fun, they help us learn, they provide support, shared experiences, help us discover who we are, what we like, what we don't like. They challenge us, they develop our skills and personalities. They help us relate on a deeper level to the world. And children need friends for social interaction. There is a caveat to this, however, and we've, as a society in the last number of generations, have gone a bit astray in this area. So children need friends, but we can't lose our role in our children's lives as adults. So when adults are replaced by friends too early, or ever actually until they're adults, it can have catastrophic implications. So this stuff is through the work of Gordon Neufeld and Gabor Mate, and they talk about peer orientation. And as somebody who's worked in childcare for 20 years and then worked with families in other contexts for 20 years and have my own kids and grandkids, and I'm old enough to know sort of life when it was sounding like my grandmother and my mother, simpler times, but when there was no tech and things like that. And, I got home from school and I went outside and played and all those kinds of, things that we seem to, dramatize in our lives right now, oh, if only it was like this. But there was a time where, we came in when the street lights came on and all that kind of stuff. So, and now we're scared to let our kids out. Street lights don't come on early enough in our world. So there's something called peer orientation. So this is Gabor Mate's sort of definition or explanation of it. And so peer orientation refers to the tendency of children and youth to look to their peers for direction, for their sense of right and wrong, codes of conduct, and their identity. Peer orientation undermines family cohesion, sabotages healthy development, and fosters an aggressive and prematurely sexualized youth culture. For parents who are already challenged by the demands of our multitasking world and stretched by stark economic realities, peer orientation further complicates the task of child rearing. Children were never meant by nature to be in a position where they were so dominant in influencing each other. This state of affairs may be the norm today, but it's neither natural nor healthy. Historically, it's a very new development due to economic and social influences prevalent since World War II, resulting in a deep undermining of adult-child connection. So basically, it's that role of the parent. Gabor Mate and Gordon Neufeld talk about alpha children and the idea that we have children who think they're the boss, and not just the boss of their peers, but the boss of their parents and their teachers. And this, according to Mate, is a fairly new phenomenon since the last World War. And it's our job as adults to make sure that children don't get into that position. So we have to make sure that children are always looking to adults for their sense of direction, their sense of right and wrong, how they're supposed to behave, who they are, all those kinds of things. Those things need to come from adults. We want them to look to adults, not to their friends, because we're growing adults. When we have children looking to each other for these things, it stunts their growth and development. It can create things like, if you think about a gang, it creates a bit of a gang mentality, where children are attached to each other, and because they're immature and children can't have multiple attachments and things like that at the same time, when they're attached to each other, their instinct is to push away the adults, or anybody else, other kids. This is how bullying tends to come about, is we have these children who are attached to each other, but they can't, it's a very unhealthy attachment, and they become a little bit like gang members. They want to be like their friends. They want to dress like their friends. They want to sound like their friends. They want to belong to their friends, but they can only do that in a very limited capacity. So in order to do that, they literally and figuratively are pushing friends away. So what do we do about this? One of the things I feel very, very strongly about is the idea that we're sending children to school and daycare, and that's part of our culture, and that's fine. But what's happening sometimes is we're inadvertently and mistakenly orienting our children to their friends. Oh, you don't want to go to school today, but your friend Susie is waiting for you. So those little messages say to the child, your friends are so important. What we really want to do is say, your teacher is waiting for you. We always want to be trying to orient our children to the adults in their world. That's who we want them to be paying attention to, and to be emulating, and to want to be like, is the adults that are responsible for them, not immature young children who are not in a position to take any responsibility, any accountability, or be good role models. 3-year-olds and 3-year-olds are not good role models for each other because they're at the same developmental stage. This is one of the reasons I kind of like mixed age groupings when you can for children. Because while the older children are not adults, they are that much more developed. So the younger children are looking to the older children for sort of what's going to come next in their own development before they get to be adults. So we want to expose children to a variety of ages and stages, but we always want to be orienting children to the adults in their life. So it seems like a really small thing. But again, if you think about how a child would internalize the message, your friends are waiting for you, then it becomes, oh, so my friends are the most important thing at school. And they're not. They're important and they're a lot of fun, but we always want children to be paying more attention to their teachers. And if you ask teachers, particularly in schools now, this is not happening. Kids have very little regard for them. They don't want to follow their lead. They're disruptive and problematic because they're banding together. The children are banding together in classrooms, and the parent or the teacher is kind of the outsider. And this is a dysfunctional social relationship. There needs to be boundaries around who children should be taking their direction from. So it's a really interesting, very complex, but an interesting sort of concept to think about. And I've certainly seen it over my 40 plus years of working with children and families that this is a thing. So we want to make sure that we're trying to do everything we can as parents to sort of right that relationship and make sure children are oriented in the right way. There we go. So how many friends are enough? The eternal question. Some of this question can come from our own experiences. So if we were very popular people, then we feel like, you know, we need to have lots of friends and popularity is important. If we were sort of one of those quieter people and we only had one or two friends, then we feel like that's, you know, that's the way to go. If we were traumatized at all when we were children around social stuff, that can play out when we're sort of setting up what we think our kids need. So I'm here to tell you that popularity is not an indicator of success nor happiness. There are lots of successful people who will tell you they were not popular in school. And there's lots of popular people who are not very happy. So those things don't go together. One good friend is better than many superficial ones. We're looking for quality here. We're looking for quality in our children's friends, but we're also looking to help our children become that quality friend. And if you look at the skills and the characteristics and the things we've already talked about, it's a lot of work when you're evolving and developing these skills to be that quality friend. So we're looking for quality versus quantity. And temperament can play a big role. So again, introverts don't need a lot of friends. They certainly like and tend to have more deep friendships, but introverts are exhausted by social interactions often. So they, you know, a lot of people or a lot of friendships, things like that can be quite draining for an introvert. Whereas extroverts, they get energy from being around people. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that they have to have a lot of friends, but they often will need to be around a lot of people. So that just by virtue of that, they may have more opportunity to develop some of those friendships. And boys and girls have very different social lives, and they develop at different paces. So try not to compare your boys and your girls. They have different needs. They have different developmental stages. They develop differently. They all get there. So no worries about that. It's timing and things like that. Social relationships are complex and overwhelming for children. So think less is more. So if you're thinking about a birthday party, and we'll talk more about birthday parties shortly. If you're thinking about a birthday party, having the entire class to a birthday party, in my mind, is a bit of a disaster waiting to happen. It's too much. It's too much noise. It's too much energy. It's too much social competition. It's too much expectation. It's too much sugar. It's just too much. So depending on your child and their age and their ability to, you know, their skill levels and their ability to handle some of these things, you need to temper your expectation of what a good birthday party is to what it is your child needs. My son is very much an introvert and never liked birthday parties, never liked to go to them, never liked to have them. So we didn't. My two girls are very much extroverts and loved to have their friends over and have birthday parties. But my son was not that kid. So inevitably, when we had a birthday with him, we would go to a movie, go play mini golf, something like that as a family, and then we would go out for dinner. And that was the extent of what he wanted and what he could handle. So that's what we did, because birthday party is supposed to be for the child. So if that's what the child wants, why would we do something else that's going to stress this child out? So particularly in the early years, until they get some of these skills sort of under their belt, think about less is more. Less children, less chaos, less activity, less frequency. When you think about play dates, and I totally understand play dates now. I never did, but that's because I used to go out, like play dates were just, we would go outside and we'd find friends and that's what we would do. But again, we live in a different world now. So play dates, the younger the child, the shorter the play date should be. What we tend to do with play dates is we're setting up an unnatural situation for kids. So maybe they don't want to play with somebody. Maybe they don't want to play with that particular person. Maybe they don't even like that other kid that you're trying to set them up with. So these are all things we want to think about. But inevitably with young children, play dates, where it derails is they're simply too long. When you look at children's attention spans and things, it's just, they're too long. 3 hours for a 3-year-old to be, and even when you set up lots of activities and things, it's a long time for a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old or even a 4-year-old sometimes. If you have highly active kids together and you're trying to have a play date in the house, that may not work very well. So you've got to look at personalities and development and what you're doing and how long you're together and all those kinds of things when you're thinking about some of those play date things. So as soon as your child's starting to have a difficult time, or the other child is, it's probably time to go. And sometimes, let's be honest, the play dates are for the adults, right? We also lack a social life sometimes. It's hard to connect with people. We're busy with all sorts of things. So sometimes the play dates are as much for the adults as they are for the children. So you're having a wonderful conversation with your friend who's this other child's mother, and you don't want it to end, but now the kids are derailing. And unfortunately, sometimes we have to put, as one of the skills is, put our own needs aside for the needs of somebody else. In this case, our children who are about to melt down, and then it's not going to be a pleasant experience for anybody. So lots of things to think about as you're putting children into these situations. And if mastery takes 10,000 hours, then certainly we want to make sure that kids are getting enough practice with their friends. But that practice has to come with some supervision and some guidance and some mentoring from adults. We can't just throw a bunch of kids into a classroom who don't have the skills yet and expect them to be able to manage the expectations of being part of a bigger group. So we want to be aware, we want to be watching, we want to be role modeling, we want to be doing all sorts of things to help our children manage these situations. And we want to start with small groups, one-on-one, couple of kids and your child, that kind of thing, and then build up to those bigger situations. So here are 6 or 7. I have all of your screens here, so it kind of blocks my, I'm gonna hide them for a bit. So here are some things that you can do. You probably already do a lot of them and don't even realize you're doing it, so pat yourself on the back and recognize that you are, of course, contributing to your child's social development as well as other areas of development. But we'll go through a few of these and just I'll give you a couple of examples of things, and then when we get to the Q&A in the chat, if you've got examples you'd like to share of some of these things with other parents, then by all means bring that to that part of the presentation. So we'll start at the top left, top right, and that's communication. Or no, sorry. Again, that part of my presentation is covered. So let me just double check what that is. Scripting, that's right. So scripting is something that we tend to do, but we could probably do it better, and we could do it more mindfully. So scripting is simply helping children to understand what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to do it. So when I was growing up, my parents had a lot of gatherings or parties. My father was a salesman, so there was always a lot of people around and things. So when they had a party, a dinner party, instead of sending my sister and I away, they engaged us in part of it. We did have to go away at some point when the drinking started, I guess. But we became responsible for things like greeting the people who were coming at the door. So we got all dressed up, which is what you did back then. And they taught us what to do and how to say things very, very concretely. So somebody's going to knock at the door. You're going to open the door. You're going to say, hello, I'm so-and-so. It's really nice to meet you. Please come in. And then we would practice those things. So we literally script children until they have the language, the ability to come up with the language on their own. We can script them. We can tell them what to say and what to do. And if any of you have ever watched Mr. Rogers, he was masterful at this. There's an episode where he takes you to a restaurant, this little cafe, and he talks about the waitress and what she does, and he talks about the menu and what the menu is, and then he talks to the waitress and says, these are my friends and they're here to blah, blah, blah. So it's all very scripted so that kids can understand when they go to a restaurant, this is what we can expect. And it takes a lot of fear and stress and anxiety away from children when they can kind of know what to expect. The challenge with free-for-all social interactions is you don't always know what's coming. So the more we can practice different scenarios with children and script them for them, then the more practice they get for when they're in those situations and things just kind of pop up. So scripting is a great way to help children develop until they have the skills on their own. At least they have a set of tools that they can use in situations. Role play is one of the most magical things for young children and even older children. Older children, it can get quite elaborate actually if they're allowed to really get into it. And then they go into theater. So role play is wonderful because what it does is it allows a child to take on a role, work some things out, test some theories, try some stuff, but there isn't the emotional ignition in the brain. So children are not emotionally charged. So when children are together and they're fighting, there's a lot of emotion there, and that gets in the way of all sorts of things. When children are role playing, the emotion is gone, so they can actually think. They can try things out, and we learn better when we're not in those emotional states. So children are actually internalizing the skills that they need while they're role playing. So set up an area in your house, try things out, practice. Puppets can be great. There's something very non-threatening about a puppet because children are very magical thinking. So the puppet takes on this persona. So now it's not me talking, it's the puppet talking. And again, there's a safety in that for children in being able to try out and test some of the things that they're thinking about or they want to try. So I would encourage you to role play new situations. So if things are, I used to do this, my kids used to play school all the time. And I could see not necessarily what actually happened, but what their perception of what happened at school was. But being able to sit with your teddy bears in a circle and be the teacher in a role play allows you to start to build that empathy for a teacher. What's it like to be a teacher? Sometimes, you know, my daughter's sister would not want to play and things like that. And so now you've got this teacher role having to deal with a child who doesn't want to comply. So role play can also do a great job of helping to build that empathy in children because they get to experience what it's like to be in somebody else's role. So let your children pretend to be mommy or daddy or sister or teacher or whatever. It's a very rich way of playing, provided children take the lead. If we start to try and direct it as adults, then it loses some of its effectiveness. Modeling, you do, whether you realize it or not, you do this all day long. So everything you do, your children are watching, and they learn more by watching than they do by listening to you, as many of you know. So one of the best things you can do when you're modeling is to narrate through the day, because so much of what we do is in our heads. Even when we're angry or we're frustrated, we will have a certain set of behaviors. We might slam something, or we might get a look on our face or whatever. And children are trying to interpret and figure all that out, which is good practice for nonverbal. But when we can narrate what we're doing or what we're feeling, we're showing children how to express it, the words to use, we're building empathy. So I'm getting really frustrated. I can't get this jar open. And you can make some of this stuff up as you're going through the day. You know, you can fake trying to get this jar open when you're making dinner, and it's like, oh, I can't get it open, and I'm feeling so frustrated. And I'm going to put it down, and I'm going to walk away, and I'm going to count to 10, and then I'm going to come back. So children don't know you're actually faking that, and maybe you're not, but it's teaching kids a strategy. So when I get frustrated, this is what it can look like, and then you can say, when do you get frustrated? Or, you know what, I notice when this happens to you, you get frustrated too. Do you think counting to 10 would help you? So you do these things throughout the day that are very organic and very naturally occurring. They're not, they're not big deals. They're not lectures. They're just, this is how we work our way through the day with our feelings and situations and things that come up. And again, you can point things out for emphasis. So, if you sit there and go, I'm so frustrated, that's probably not going to register as much as if you go, oh, I'm so frustrated. Because that's how kids feel. Kids' feelings are bigger than life, a lot of them. So when you can emphasize some of the things you want to point out, that can be helpful for kids to go, oh, and pay attention. Problem solving is a key skill for life. And we can start helping children learn to solve problems very young. There are lots of models. So if you need some structure around how to solve a problem, like step 1, step 2, step 3, those things are available to you online. And I'm sure Christine has some as well. But we want kids don't want fluff. They want things that seem meaningful and important. So problems for children are not as big as ours, obviously, but they're important. So think about things that are important to your child. And instead of just telling them what to do and solving everything for them, because that's, let's face it, the fastest way to do it, we want to try when we can to take some time to sit down and go through a process, right? So we calm down, we identify the problem, we figure out what some solutions are, we pick one, we try it out. That's a very simple problem solving framework. The thing is, if kids come up with the solutions, they're much more likely to follow through on them, and they're much more likely to work, to be honest with you, if they're palatable to you. And when 4-year-olds or 3-year-olds have 3-year-old or 4-year-old or 5-year-old or 8-year-old problems, they tend to generate solutions that are appropriate for those problems. We tend to generate solutions that are sometimes a little more cerebral and thinking, and a little bit unrelated, or a little bit, they don't make sense to our kids. So the more engaged they are in the process, the more likely it is that the plan is going to work, because you're not telling them what to do, you're engaging them. It's hard to argue with yourself. So you tend not to kick in kids' counter will and those kinds of things, and get much more compliance and cooperation, which again are social skills, but also help to teach children moving forward that when I have a problem with a friend, this is what I can do, or this is what we can do. So this is a life skill for the ages. So as many problems as you can try and solve with your kids, and they'll be little at first, and trust me, the bigger problems will come. But and it could be a family problem. You can have family meetings. We seem to be having trouble tidying up, and it's really important that we do that so people don't get hurt. Blah blah blah. How can we make this tidying up thing work? And then you put it out to the kids. Those kinds of things can be helpful. We've talked a little bit about empathy and things like that. So really, really working on those emotional skills. And emotional regulation being one of the skills that seems to be the most lacking in our children these days. Children don't know how to regulate their feelings, and it's causing a lot of problems when they get into environments like school, where there is a big expectation that children are going to have emotional regulation skills, particularly. So there's a guy named Stuart Shanker who's done his whole work is on emotional regulation. He works with a lot of schools. He's got a lot of strategies. We want to teach, it's okay for kids to wait. It's a simple thing, but we're so busy either trying to meet our kids' needs to keep them happy, or because we don't have the time to deal with whatever it is. So it's like, here, we need kids to be upset. We need kids to be sad. We need kids to be disappointed. We need kids to be angry. We need kids to have that full experience of all the emotions and work their way through the emotion, not have it suppressed, not have it buried, not have it dismissed, not have it fixed, but to actually work through having that feeling. And then we teach kids how to communicate that feeling, how to figure out what you need, how to get what you need, those kinds of things. But waiting is one of the basic skills that children seem to be lacking now in terms of regulation. They don't know how to wait for anything. So we do live in an instant gratification world, and it's not serving our children at all. So teach your children how to wait for things and give them strategies. Just sitting there in a line doing nothing is not going to work for a young child particularly. So you need to tell a story, sing a song, count, like give kids strategies that will help them wait, and start small. Start with waiting for 30 seconds if it's hard for your child, and then build up those kinds of things. There's a ton of other emotional skills as well. And I will say that children must understand their own feelings and their needs before they can do that with others. So we want to really focus on helping children understand and give language to their feelings and their needs and be able to communicate those. And then they'll be more able to deal with and to respond to and identify the feelings and needs of others. So it starts with them first. So when we say to somebody, how do you think Johnny feels? Well, if I haven't had my feelings acknowledged, I cannot possibly think about how Johnny feels, because I'm still revved up, I'm still upset, I still have this big feeling. So empathy and acknowledgement of those feelings helps to dissipate them. So when we're dealing with a conflict between two children, we want to acknowledge the child, even in aggression. Our tendency is to go straight to the child who's been hit. Well, the child who did the hitting has also got some stuff going on. So we need to acknowledge that, calm that down, while still pulling this child in and saying, I'm going to take care of this, we're going to do this, and working with the two of them together instead of separating them and sending them one off to feel bad about it himself and the other one feeling like a victim. So there's lots of things like that that you can do between children to help them figure out how to work out some of this and how to identify feelings and things like that. I said before, growing up takes a long time, and therefore they need our support, our guidance, our presence, not the kind you buy at the store, but the kind that says, I'm here, and our help for a very, very, very long time. And we want to create a dependence on us so that we can provide those things for our children. When we create independence too soon, it turns children to each other, which we know is not a good thing, peer orientation, and it undermines our ability to influence and parent our kids. So dependence is the road to independence. And again, we live in a very independent focused world, and we want and think it's best for our children to grow up to be independent very, very quickly. And it's a biological process. So independence comes somewhere between 20 and 30. True independence, because there's an element of biology and development that has to happen in order for that to occur. So you want your children, believe it or not, to be dependent on you for a lot of things. And it can seem counterintuitive to what culture is telling you, and it can feel kind of overwhelming because it's like, I need this kid to be able to do this on his own. And the more dependent a child can be on you, and I'm not talking about sort of learned helplessness dependence, I'm talking about appropriate dependence, age-appropriate dependence on the people who are in charge of and taking care of children. There's a big difference there. So the dependence that I'm talking about comes from a child's need. Learned helplessness and things like that come from a parent's need. So parents should always be looking at, when is my child, where is my child ready to advance a little bit? While I still provide some support, but I'm giving them enough room and space to try things out. But I'm always here when they fall and that kind of thing. So if you look at some of the Circle of Security material, it talks a lot about that. It's I let my child go, but I'm here when they can come back to me. And children will look, and as long as they have that security of a parent or an adult around, then it frees them essentially to go out and explore and try new things. When children feel like the adults in their lives are not available and not supportive, they either turn to somebody else, and let's face it, kids outnumber adults. 20, 25, 30 kids in a classroom to 2 adults. There's way more opportunity for children to look to each other. So it's a lot of work for adults to keep those kids sort of look at me, I'm going to show you how to do it. And that requires a relationship that's based in trust and attachment and those kinds of things. But we do need to be patient and supportive of our children for much longer than sometimes we might like to think we need to be, even strongly into adolescence. Adolescents seem to be pushing us away, but in fact, they need us probably more in some respects, because the world is much more complicated when you're an adolescent. So it's important that we maintain that relationship so that when things get even harder for our kids, they look to us for help, not to their 14 or 15-year-old friend. And play and experience. So there's lots to be said for experience, as we know. Most of us learn best through experience, not through being told what to know and what to do. But children do not work. Work is not a construct that is in their biology. So when we try to put kids to work, it's futile. Children play. That's how they learn. And it's a certain type of play. It's deep, meaningful, extended play. It's play that they direct. It's fun. So if you want to get through the day better or easier, you got it. I mean, we're very work focused as adults. Everything is about work, 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 work. We have forgotten how to play. And in my experience, women more so than men. I think dads still have a great ability to get down and really play with kids. And I don't know why we moms have such a hard time doing that, but we do. We multitask, our brains are going a million miles a minute. So we'll play for 2 minutes and then we're on to something else. Whereas often I see dads down on that floor and they'll play for hours. And it needs to be child directed and it needs to be the child's interest. So when you start to count a tower or ask them what colors it is, it's no longer play. Now you've put them to work. There's a task, there's an agenda, and there's a test. I'm testing you to see if you know the colors. So we want to really just be careful about when we're doing those kinds of things, that it changes the play for children. We want to tell stories, oral stories. We've lost that art. If we want to teach children how to listen, which is, again, an essential friendship social skill, then we don't always want to have something for them to look at or manipulate. We want them to listen, and they won't listen to you nagging at them and lecturing them. That's not how they're wired. But they will listen to you tell stories. So we want to build those listening skills with oral storytelling, as well as stories with props and books, and use your tablets once in a while, but use books and other things as well, different medium. Play games, watch others, get off tech. Tech is not a social developing tool. In order for children to develop social skills, they need to be fully engaged with another human being. Technology does not do it. So if this is a focus, you need to put the tech away, and at least some of the time, not all the time. I know it's a reality of life, but be reasonable and understand that tech does not teach things as well in anything in child development, as well as another human could teach a child. So it's quick and easy and it has its uses, but it's not a great learning tool, particularly for the soft social emotional skills. Social skills require children to be faced with other people, face to face. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 7 ways that you can, in your day-to-day lives, and again, you're doing a lot of this, start to think about how you can support your child's social and emotional development. So before we get to a birthday party scenario, any questions or anything that is coming to mind that people might want to talk about?
Hi, Nikki.
Hey.
It's going great, so thank you. I have a one question from much earlier on, but I think I know the answer, and so I tried to answer it. And that was if the list of virtues, that's going to be included in the link that we send along. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I'll include a link to the website.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
And if you Google Virtues Project, there are some things that other people have done with that material. Because some of the stuff on that website you have to buy and things like that. But if you Google Virtues Project, so many people have been using it that there's lots of activities and videos and things online that are not from the organization. But I would encourage you to look at the organization because it really gives you a core idea of what they're about. Okay.
Great. And then a question that just came in is, does TV count as tech? Because I think the lead into that is if they're watching a learning show together with the child and talking about it together, does that change sort of the place?
That's definitely the ideal. So if you're going to use technology, and TV counts as tech, it's screen time. For whatever reason, it does feel like it's a little bit different. I don't know if it's because we've all grown up with more TV than we have computers, but TV does seem a little different, but it is still tech, and it's still screen time. And again, I'm not saying don't use it. I'm just saying, but the ideal is if you are going to use it, that you're doing it with your child, because then that child is getting the benefit of whatever is on the tech, which can be fun and engaging, but they're also getting that social interaction with you. And one of the things that we know about TV, and this is TV and tech, because I remember when I was much, much younger, Believe it or not, I came around when TV was just kind of coming to everybody's home. It's hard to believe that it was not that long ago. But I mean, our first TV was black and white. We actually had to get up and turn the dial. We had a little antenna, and we got like 3 channels. So it's come a long way. But at some point when I was a kid, kindergarten teachers particularly started to become very, very concerned about things like Sesame Street because of the pace. So that's the one thing that tech tends to do, is it creates a pace that children can't always keep up with, and actually we don't want children to keep up with. So children start to go to school or to wherever, and they start to expect this constant activity and this constant pace. And A, we don't learn that fast. And B, it just creates a frenzy almost in their bodies. And the expectation for this instant gratification and fast, colorful, loud input is affecting children's brains. So we want to temper some of that with some quiet things, with nature. Get your kids into nature. It's way better than tech. But we want to balance those things. So if kids are getting tech and they're getting all of that input, then we want to teach kids how to do yoga or meditate, or, go out and play, or take a walk in the woods, or do something that balances the brain so that the brain doesn't become wired for this constant frenetic input. And it is what's happening in some kids. So they go to school, and you've got a teacher, in grade 1 or 2 standing in front of a blackboard, because some of them still do this. They don't all have smart boards. And it's like, okay, so now here's what and the kids are like, within 5 minutes, they're like, okay, this isn't working for me because it's not fast enough. So human interaction is not as fast as tech. So we want to be careful that we don't wire our kids' brains for this, again, this frenetic, constant, fast, loud, colorful input. Because when they go out into the world, that's not what it's like. And then they get bored and they become those problem kids because they won't pay attention.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's it in the chat box. So I'll pass it over to you, Nikki. Thanks.
Okie doke. So let's talk a little bit about birthday parties. And I did this a little bit already. I gave you a little preview. But birthday parties can be, not always, but can be a disaster waiting to happen. And the younger the child, the more this is the case. Because again, what we've got a set of expectations and an environment that is not aligned with what the child is capable of doing, particularly with no support. So we have, it is an exercise in too much. We want children to share. We want children to sit around in a circle and watch one child open 20 presents, which is going to take an hour. So attention span off the bat is done. It's usually at the end of the time, not at the beginning. So the kids have already had all their sugar and all their activity, and they're already emotionally and sensory spent. So I'm not saying we shouldn't have birthday parties. I'm saying we need to temper them a little bit, and we need to set expectations. So the younger the child, you need to think about less children, less cake, less time, less presents, maybe less activity, all of those things, because children's little systems cannot handle that. And invariably, somebody or a bunch of somebodies are going to start to have meltdowns, and then parents are going to get embarrassed, and they're going to put more pressure on their kids. And then the kids are going to get more stressed, and they're going to ramp up even more. And all of a sudden, the association with birthday parties, which should be, oh my gosh, those are fun, and now becomes this very negative kind of, oh, not so sure I want to do birthday parties. And it's because we've put them into a situation that is not appropriate for their skills. And I could say the same thing about taking your child grocery shopping at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Some kids can't handle lessons after school or daycare because they've held it together all day at school or daycare. So they got nothing left by the time you take them to swimming lessons at 6 o'clock. So we really want to look at our expectations around the places and the things that we're putting our kids into and set them up for success. And it may mean that we have to temper our own desires and our own expectations. I mean, who doesn't want a huge party for their child? Me, I never wanted a huge party, never a huge birthday party person. But we want to make sure it's a positive experience and a learning experience, not just for our own children, but for the children and the parents attending. So really think hard about it and then put some of those strategies in place. Script your kids. This is what happens in a birthday party. Use visuals if you want, take pictures, use pictures, whatever. You know, we're going to do this and this. Share that with the other kids coming. So maybe the other parents will be inclined to say, this is how it's going to go. We're going to go and we're going to drop our presents off and we're going to play. And then we're going to have some pizza. And then Susie's going to open her presents and then we're going to go home. So kids go in kind of knowing and then remind them through the activity. So you can use some of those strategies I talked about to better manage the situation. But children, young children, particularly under 5, can only have one friend at a time because their brains aren't wired to be able to master how do I manage several relationships all at once. So now we've got 15 kids and everybody's focused on the birthday child. But the birthday child can only really focus on one child at a time, which sometimes works out okay because the other kids go and play with each other. But again, we want to make sure that it's developmentally appropriate. So there used to be a rule that said, I'm starting to think it's a good one, whatever the age of your child, that's how many friends they should have at their party. So if you're having a party for a 2-year-old, you need 2 kids. If you're having a party for a 3-year-old, it's 3 kids. This isn't forever. This is just until your child has some of the skills they need to manage the environment that you're setting up for them. And then the adults at the party need to be engaged with overseeing and monitoring and role modeling and guiding the kids instead of everybody, you know, all the adults are in the party room having their conversations and things, and the kids are left to their own devices because we know when young children are overdone, that's when we get a lot of behavior. So we get a lot of tears, we get a lot of hitting, we get a lot of screaming. Those are all signs that the children are overloaded. And what children need to stay calm is us. They need us to be able to watch and to intervene when we see something starting to erupt. We want to get in there before it erupts. So the role of parents in birthday parties is actually that, and not, the social stuff that, again, it's like play dates. We would all like to be able to do that. So pair off, that's great. But your role is still to maintain order in potential chaos. And I know people now are tending to open presents at home and things like that, which I think for very young children is a much kinder way to approach presents, because children just don't understand. Young children don't understand why they can't have one. That said, when you go buying the birthday present, there's no reason whatsoever to be buying a present for your child while you're buying a present for his friend. We do need to teach children, this is so-and-so's special birthday. This is not your special birthday. And again, that child's going to be sad and disappointed and maybe frustrated. And those are the opportunities, and they are opportunities, where we can start to teach children You can have these big feelings. I can help you with them, and you can get through them and be okay at the other end. When we just appease our children because we're either uncomfortable with their feelings, where we don't have time. There's a million reasons why we don't want our children to have some of these big feelings, but we're really doing our children a disservice. We're depriving them of a full emotional being. So as hard as it is to see your children sad and disappointed and upset and all of that, it is an important part of growing up. So there's no need to be buying a present for your child while you're buying a present for somebody else for a birthday party. They need to wait, you know. And one of the things I used to do is just to acknowledge my child's desire for presents was we would start a birthday list. So as we were going around trying to find a present for another child, we would write down the things that she saw that she thought she might like for her birthday party or for her birthday. So it validates the fact that, you know, there are things that you want and you can wait. And then we would revisit that list closer to the birthday and say, well, do you still want that? And do you still want that? It's like, no, no, no. And it's like, see, you didn't really, you know, they just don't want to miss out. So again, it's important for children to have these emotions and be brought through them with a caring, responsive adult. But if birthday parties are a problem, think about scaling them down. And I know for some people that's hard because there's adult expectation around this. I know there's lots of, what are you doing and where are you? My kids always had their birthday parties at home. And it was a lot of work. But they loved having their friends at their house. And it was cheaper and it was calmer, and it, you know, there's lots of things. So you can mix it up. You can go somewhere one year and go stay home and do something the next year, that kind of thing. But watch out that you're not creating a birthday party that is around your expectations or your need to be able to say to somebody, well, you know, we did this and we did that. Because I know amongst some parents there is that sense of I have to be like, you know, we used to call it keeping up with the Joneses. Your priority and your responsibility is to do what is right for your child. And this is supposed to be a special day for them. It's like weddings. You know, you have 300 people, the bride and groom know almost none of them. Who's the day for? So we want to stay focused on who is the day for and make it as enjoyable and as palatable and as successful as it possibly can be. And there'll come a time where you can have 20 kids, absolutely. But maybe not when they're little. So food for thought, think about times when you feel stressed and overwhelmed. And what do you need to feel better? Often you need some calm, or you need somebody to come in and help you kind of say, okay, let's think about this for a minute. Let's just take a breath. So you need somebody to come in and kind of help you get through those feelings or come out of the situation. And that's a strategy too. Sometimes if your child is getting overwhelmed at a party, rather than saying, that's it, we're going home, and grabbing your kid by the arm and marching them out, you can take them for a walk outside, or you can, you know, give them several glasses of water to dilute the sugar. But you can take them out of that situation for a few minutes, let them pull themselves together, and then go back in. So taking children immediately out of a situation that they're finding hard doesn't teach them really how to manage the situation. So we want to pull them out, calm them down, and then take them back in with some strategies. So what are you going to do next? Blah, blah, blah. You know, so you're coaching and scripting them a little bit, and then giving them another chance. And if they blow up again, you have to decide for yourself and your child how many chances you give them. But when children are learning something, they need chances to figure out a different approach or something to do and then go back and retry it, right? Because they may not have another birthday party for 6 months. So another shot at trying things is always good. Sometimes you just have to get rid of that big emotional piece, calm them down, and then they're okay to go back in. So that's my little spiel on birthday party. Sharing. The picture on the right is what we would all like to see our children do all the time. And the picture on the left is the reality for most children, at least some of the time. So sharing is a concept that, again, young children don't understand because it's this give and take, compromise, looking at the needs of others and the feelings of others. And very young children have limited capacity to do that because that part of the brain's not developed. So we want to watch our expectations. So again, just because we can't expect it from a child doesn't mean we don't introduce it and we don't expose them. We just need to expose them with a different set of expectations. Like, you know, if you're going to go to a play group with 2-year-olds, you can expect that there are going to be some struggles over toys for at least part of the time, maybe not even with your child, but with somebody else's child, because it's developmentally appropriate. 2-year-olds don't share. They are very me-oriented individuals, and the rest of the world, according to the 2-year-old, revolves around them because they don't have the capacity to put themselves into somebody else's shoes. So when we say to a 2-year-old, how do you think Johnny feels? I have no idea. I don't even know how I feel. So these are opportunities to sit down with a child or 2 children and say, oh, really want that toy. And oh, you really want it too. You both want the same toy. Right? So we want to validate and give words to the children's experiences and the children's words. But we only have one. And you might say to a couple of 2-year-olds, what can we do? And sometimes, not always, but sometimes 2-year-olds can come up with things. And sometimes when you do that, and you don't get mad at one of them and send one off and, you know, focus on another that has been wronged, and just pull them together and work on it together, then all of a sudden, often, one child will give the other child the toy and move on to something else. They are very in the moment beings, 2-year-olds. So their feelings are big and they erupt, but then they often go away just as fast, and the problem goes away just as fast as well. And again, sometimes we don't want to, sometimes if there's 2 of the same toy, what you'll find is you get both children, and that's not what they want. They only want the one the other child has, and that's a developmental thing. So it's not a big deal. It's not a deficit. It's not a problem. It's just a 2-year-old. So sometimes giving another child the same toy or a different toy will work, and other times it won't. And sometimes you'll have to put that toy that is at the center of the problem away, out of sight, before you try to deal with the problem. Because children, if I'm fighting over this and I can still see it, I'm not hearing you or anybody else. I'm focused on this. I want that. I want it, I want it, I want it, I want it, I want it. So sometimes one of the best strategies when there's a sharing issue is to temporarily put the toy away and then bring it back. And again, this is an ideal opportunity once you can get the emotions settled, 3, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds and older, identify the problem, and then turn it over to the children to help come up with solutions. So you want to hear both children's solutions, and then you want to help them come up with an idea that they can both live with, rather than you interjecting what you're going to do, right? Because again, if children are engaged in the process, your job is to mentor them through it, coach them through it, give them the tools. If they agree that each person will have it for 5 minutes, well, they can't tell time, and most of them don't have watches. So your role becomes timekeeper. Okay, so you're going to have it for 5 minutes and you're going to have it for 5 minutes, right? That's what you agreed on? Okay, I will keep track of the time, right? And then, so how are we gonna decide who goes first? So you're coaching kids through the process, but you're letting them actually come up with the idea. Or a bunch of ideas, and then you have to choose. Which one would we like to try first? This can take some time, but again, problem solving is a really, really valuable life skill. So we want to make sure that we can take our kids through those steps, whatever steps you choose to use, as often as you can. It gives kids confidence. It gives kids self-confidence and self-esteem to know that if something comes up, I've got a process that I can use to solve a problem. I am a problem solver, not a problem, right? And I will say, we all have things that we don't like or want to share with others, even as adults. When I used to do these kinds of things in person, I would ask all the mums in the group, because it was usually mums, to take off their wedding rings and hand them to somebody else. And the look on people's faces was like, okay, wait a minute here. What are you doing? So, and that was just to demonstrate the fact that there are some things that are important and precious to us that we don't want to share. And children have the same thing, and children should not be made to share everything. But again, we want to script kids. So if children have their own room or their own space somewhere, then there needs to be things in that place that the child deems sacred and they don't have to share. And that's sharing with siblings, sharing with friends. Like there are certain things that they just hold very dear, and that should be allowed. But then there needs to be clarity around, if you're going to have a friend over, we need to talk about the things that you are going to share and the things that you're not going to share need to be put away. So we give kids permission to have those precious things. They need to be put away so they're not teasing the other child. But then there is that piece that says, we must have some things that you will share for your friend because we want both of you to have fun, right? So these kinds of free strategies, if you will. But again, respecting the fact that children don't have to share everything. And older children should not be made to have to kowtow to younger ones. But that's a whole sibling course. So, but, older children's rights to play with age-appropriate materials, even if it's not appropriate for the toddler, need to be preserved. You need to figure out how to make that happen so that the older child's needs are met as well as the younger child, and they're not always made to give in, because it doesn't do that younger child any good either, because they grow up thinking they can have anything they want and they learn to use it against the sibling. So those are just a couple of sort of common social problems that we have. So when the children on the right, even though they're looking like they're a bit young, but again, we want to use language from a very young age when language is developing. Don't be afraid to use complex language. So we want to look at those two kids and we don't want to judge. Oh, look, good job. It's a judgment. We want to say, wow, you two are really cooperating, and then stop. We tend to overtalk as adults and parents. So we want to plant the seed. This looks very cooperative. You're both working on the tower. Refrain from good job if you can. I know it just comes out, but it is an evaluation and a judgment. So if we can stop ourselves at, this looks like a lot of cooperating going on, done, and walk away. And children will internalize those messages and make up their own minds rather than you telling them they're cooperative. This looks like a cooperative behavior. Tells children, they'll internalize that, they'll think about that, and over time, they will come to the notion that they are cooperative people. And they will understand what cooperative behaviors are. right? So it's a nice double whammy in terms of benefit, actually triple, because then you're giving kids great language too. So identify the behavior. You're both taking turns. That's what I call cooperation, and then walk away. So now kids have lots to think about. And again, self-esteem comes from a child's decision internally that they are worthy and cooperative and all those other things, not from somebody externally telling them that's what they are. So we want to help children develop this sense of themselves. And that's often done best by parents just observing and commenting in these kinds of ways. So we're not praising, we're not judging, we are simply narrating. I see lots of cooperation going on here. And then we stop. Okay. So we need best friends because they laugh at the same stupid things we do, because they give us honest advice, because they will be there for us, even if they're thousands of miles away, because they celebrate with us when we're at our best, but they still love us at our worst. So I like that one. So we all need friends. We don't need lots of friends necessarily, but we all need best friends and good friends, and distance and those kinds of things tend not to get in the way of those really good friendships. And they take years to develop. They take years. So if you know yourself, your 4-year-old's best friend today is not your 4-year-old's best friend tomorrow necessarily. So you hear people talking about, their best friends from kindergarten. So these are people who have a long history of a relationship and being together. So it takes time. Everything about kids and growing up takes time. I want to thank you. I hope you all have friendships like this that take you from infancy right to old age. Not that you're there yet. And I wish for you friendships that feed your soul, are playful and fun, and fill your hearts with love and connection that lasts a lifetime. And that is that.
Thank you, Nikki. Oh my goodness, so much. I learned a lot today. Thank you so much. I really did. I had something in the chat here. Where did it go? I think I lost it. I don't know why it went down when you pulled your screen down. Oh no, there it is on the side. Sorry. It says it's from Marina.
Hi, Marina.
I think she left already though.
Oh.
But she's, and it's, I think you remember Marina probably from your in-person parenting.
Yeah. Well, we'll put it on for the recording and she can get her answer later.
Yeah. So she just wrote, no, she's just made a comment and it's beautiful. It says, Nikki makes everything sound reasonable, not simple, but just makes sense and gives me confidence to keep going. Thank you, Nikki and OPCC. Please keep holding parenting sessions. So really nice.
That is nice.
Really nice.
Thanks, Marina.
Yeah. Before we jump into, we just have a couple of people on here. I'm going to do a quick poll if you don't mind. I know a few people probably had to go pick up kids and do other kinds of things, but I'm going to just quickly, do I still have the poll?
Maybe they can email you if they're not here and they watch the recording.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping to do. And you know what? Why is it going on at the bottom?
Uh-oh.
Maybe it's, no, it's not in the bottom. Here it is. I'm going to, that's funny. I can't find the poll. It was there before.
I got it. You want me to launch it?
Oh, maybe you have it. Can you launch it, Nikki? It's just a poll. Those of you still online, if you can answer it. We're just trying to get some feedback of how we are best to keep moving forward with parenting sessions, whether it be in person, recording, that kind of thing. So if you can launch it, Nikki, that would be great.
Okay, is it there?
Yeah, I see it. So I think everybody.
Launch. So you tell me when I need to end it.
If people are able to answer, we'll see the questions being answered. If they're busy, they might not be able to answer it because I don't see anything happening.
No, it says there's only three.
Yeah. So I can always send this out. I just know that it's oh, Jay wrote we should have more sessions and shorter duration, maximum 1 hour. So that was one of the things I put in there. What's the time frame we're looking at? What time of day? Recorded? Preference of whether it being something that you're engaged with, or do you prefer the style of sort of being spread over 6 instead of 3 sessions? Okay, yeah, good. Yeah, there's always so much to talk about. Interactive, okay, nice. So we're gonna open up interactive right now. It's excellent.
More polls.
All right. Older than 6. We have a lot of 4 to 6-year-old families here too. Well, 2 or 3. All right, up to an hour, yeah. And yes, everybody likes an opportunity to have a bit of Q&A. So we'll move to that part right now, since there might be a couple of questions. So if anyone has any questions, thank you for taking the time to answer that poll. I appreciate it. I think you should be able to unmute yourself if anybody does have any questions. I'm giving you that option now. So I'll open it up to you if you can't answer any questions. Sorry, if you can't unmute, feel free to pop it into the chat. Thank you, Nikki, for the presentation. Have a good afternoon.
Hi, Diana. Thanks for hanging in.
All right, so you can see the chat now too. Perfect. All right, well, I think that's it then. Maybe there's no Q&A right now. I just have to say, Nikki, so much awesome information. I'm going to do a bunch of little things based on everything I learned today. And the one thing I really picked up on, just like wanted to mention, which is probably another whole webinar, is talking about the peer orientation piece and how it's so, and that's what our kids are like driven to, like they're naturally going to looking for those likes on, you know, their social media, and you know, it's peer orientation is a really interesting.
And our kids are not the first generation, which is the problem. So we have a couple of generations of peer-oriented people. So some of these parents are peer-oriented as well. So they don't even see it.
Right. Yeah.
So
a lot to learn there.
It's very complicated, and it's interesting. It's really interesting.
Yeah. And I have someone on their iPhone asking if they can ask some questions over email, and that won't be a problem. So if you want to send them to me, I can send them to Nikki, and you guys could, I know she'd be happy to correct Nikki to respond. Okay.
Yep.
Sounds
No
great.
problem.
Yeah. So you can send them to me at parenting@op-cc.ca. Just so you know. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
You.
Thanks,
Take care.
Nikki.
Thanks, Christine. We'll talk soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.